At Silverwood Academy, a new cleaner named Mr. Kofi started working quietly one Monday morning. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He wore the same blue uniform every day, a little worn out but always clean and neat. He spoke softly, greeted everyone politely, and never seemed to be in a hurry. No one knew much about him, and he never talked about his past. He just did his work with quiet care, sweeping the long hallways and polishing the classroom floors until they shone. The teachers liked him because he was respectful and dependable. He never complained, even when he had to clean up big messes after school events. But some students didn't see him that way. They looked at him and only saw a cleaner, someone they thought was below them. Among them were three friends, Ao, Nia, and Tund, who were known around the school for their charm, jokes, and laughter. They were popular, smart, and confident, but sometimes their jokes went too far. The first time they noticed Mr. Kofi was when he was mopping the floor near the cafeteria. It was lunchtime and the hallway was full of students laughing and chatting. Ao nudged Tund and whispered, "Look at him, so serious about cleaning the floor. You'd think he's polishing gold." Tund chuckled and Nia rolled her eyes but didn't stop them. "Maybe he used to be a king before he started cleaning floors," Tund added with a laugh. Mr. Kofi heard them but he said nothing. He just smiled gently and continued mopping, his calmness making them feel oddly uneasy for a moment. Still they kept laughing and walked away. Days turned into weeks and every morning Mr. Kofi arrived before sunrise. When everyone else was still sleeping, he would unlock the classrooms, open the windows, and let in the cool morning breeze. He hummed quietly while he worked, a soft tune that echoed through the empty halls. He made sure the blackboards were spotless, the desks neatly arranged, and the corridors shining. He was always there when no one else was, and yet few noticed his presence. To most students he was invisible, a background figure who existed only to clean up after them. But there was something about his calm and quiet way of working that caught the attention of one teacher, Mrs. Kamara, who taught science. One morning she saw him gently fixing a broken chair leg in her classroom. "You didn't have to do that," she said kindly. Mr. Kofi smiled. "It was loose. Someone could have fallen." "You're very observant," she replied. "Have you done carpentry before?" He paused, then said softly, "A little. I've done many things." That was all he said and she didn't ask more. But from that day she started greeting him warmly, and he always responded with a kind nod. Meanwhile Ao, Nia, and Tund continued their jokes. They would sometimes drop empty bottles near where he was cleaning, pretending it was an accident. "Oh no, we made a mess. Don't worry, the cleaner's here," Ao would say with a smirk. Mr. Kofi would simply bend down, pick up the bottle, and place it in the bin. "Thank you, sir," he would say calmly and walk away. His politeness only made them laugh harder. "Why does he even talk like that?" Tund asked one day. "He calls everyone sir or ma'am like he's some kind of royal servant." But there was one student who didn't laugh, Nia. She went along with her friends' teasing, but deep down, something about Mr. Kofi's calm nature made her curious. One afternoon, when her friends had left, she saw him sitting quietly on a bench outside, eating a small meal from a container. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Hi," she said softly. He looked up and smiled. "Good afternoon, Miss Nia." She blinked in surprise. "You know my name?" He nodded. "Yes. I learned the names of students. It helps me keep track of which classrooms need more care." Nia smiled awkwardly. "You work really hard." "Thank you," he said. "Work is a blessing if you do it with purpose." She didn't know what to say after that. His words were simple but somehow meaningful. She went back to her friends, but the conversation stayed in her mind for days. One rainy morning Ao and Tund decided to play a prank. They filled a bucket with soapy water and placed it at the top of a doorway in the back hall. Their plan was to make the bucket fall on Mr. Kofi as he walked through. Nia told them it was a bad idea but they laughed it off. "It's just a joke," Ao said. "He won't even get mad." When Mr. Kofi finally came down the hallway, he stopped before the door. He looked up as if sensing something was off. He quietly reached up and caught the edge of the bucket just before it tipped over. Then he looked toward the corner where the students were hiding and smiled. "It's a good thing I was careful," he said calmly. "We wouldn't want anyone slipping." Ao and Tund froze. They expected him to shout or complain, but he didn't. He just put the bucket down, cleaned the small spill, and went back to work. For the first time, the boys felt embarrassed. Later that week, the principal announced that the school would be hosting a big science fair. Students were excited. There would be experiments, presentations, and even a special booth run by a local university that offered free DNA testing for learning purposes. Ao's group decided to participate in the event. "It'll be fun," Tun said. "Let's all do the DNA thing." That afternoon, as they passed Mr. Kofi in the hallway, Ao had an idea. "Hey, Mr. Kofi," he called out with a grin. "You should take the DNA test too. Maybe we'll find out you're secretly a prince." The others laughed. Even Nia smiled awkwardly, though she felt guilty. To their surprise, Mr. Kofi chuckled softly. "Perhaps," he said. "There's always something to learn about where we come from." Then he nodded politely and walked away. That calm response puzzled them again. He never seemed angry or offended, no matter what they said. It was as if he carried a quiet strength that didn't need to prove anything. As the science fair approached, more students began to notice Mr. Kofi. They saw how hard he worked to prepare the school, cleaning the hall, setting up chairs, helping teachers move tables. He did it all without being asked, always with that same quiet smile. Slowly, a few students began greeting him instead of ignoring him. Some even started helping him carry boxes. But Ao, Tund, and Nia still didn't realize how much they were about to learn. Behind that simple blue uniform, behind the quiet voice and gentle smile, Mr. Kofi carried a story that none of them could have imagined. And soon, a single DNA test would reveal it all. The morning of the science fair arrived bright and full of excitement. Silverwood Academy was buzzing like a beehive. Students rushed through the hallways carrying colorful posters, test tubes, and model volcanoes that smoked with dry ice. Teachers moved between classrooms checking that every group was ready, while cheerful music played over the speakers. The smell of fresh paint and glue filled the air. Everyone had been preparing for weeks. The fair was a big event for the school because a local university had agreed to send scientists to help. They had brought real lab equipment, microscopes, and even a portable DNA testing station. It was meant to teach students about science in a fun way. Ao, Nia, and Tund were especially excited. Their group had built a small robot that could pick up and sort plastic waste. They were confident it would win first prize. As they checked their project, Tund noticed a tall man polishing the trophy stand near the stage. It was Mr. Kofi, as usual, working quietly while everyone else focused on the event. "Still cleaning even on the big day," Ao said with a grin. "Maybe he'll polish our trophy when we win." Tund laughed and even Nia smiled, though she didn't like teasing him anymore. "Leave him alone," she said softly. "Oh, relax," Ao replied. "He doesn't care. He never gets angry." Later that morning, the university team arrived and began setting up their booth. The large sign read in bold letters, "Discover your DNA, find your roots." It immediately caught everyone's attention. Students crowded around as the scientists explained how it worked. "This is a simple educational test," one of the researchers said. "It's not a medical test, but it can show where your ancestors may have come from. You'll just swab the inside of your cheek and we'll send the samples to our lab. In a week or so, you'll get a report about your origins." The idea fascinated everyone. Some students talked excitedly about finding out if they had distant relatives from faraway places. Others were simply curious about how DNA worked. When the line opened, Ao and his friends were among the first to sign up. They joked while filling out the forms. "Maybe we'll find out we're long-lost princes," Tun said dramatically. "Or maybe you'll just find out you're from the next town over," Nia teased. While they waited for their turn, Mr. Kofi walked past carrying a bucket and mop. He paused for a moment, watching the students with quiet interest. One of the scientists noticed him and smiled. "You're welcome to join too, sir," she said kindly. "It's open to everyone." Before Mr. Kofi could answer, Ao spoke up, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yeah, Mr. Kofi, you should do it. Let's see where the cleaner's from." A few students laughed, though not all of them found it funny. Nia looked uncomfortable. But Mr. Kofi just smiled gently. "Why not?" he said. "There is always something to learn." He put down his cleaning tools, wiped his hands, and stepped forward to take a swab kit. His calm response caught the group off guard. They had expected him to ignore them or maybe walk away, but instead, he joined in without hesitation. The scientist handed him a small cotton swab and a form to write his name. He filled it out carefully and gave it back with a polite thank you. As he left, Ao whispered, "I can't believe he actually did it." Tun chuckled. "Maybe he thinks it'll tell him he's a king after all." But Nia didn't laugh this time. She watched Mr. Kofi return to his work, quietly mopping the stage steps, and for some reason she couldn't stop thinking about the peaceful expression on his face. The day went on. Students presented their projects one by one. Some demonstrations failed in small bursts of smoke, while others impressed the judges. The air was filled with laughter, applause, and the sound of students explaining their experiments. When it was time for Ao's group to present, they rolled out their robot proudly. It moved smoothly at first, picking up small pieces of plastic from the floor, but then one of its sensors glitched and it started spinning in circles. The audience laughed kindly and even the judges smiled. "It's okay," said one of them. "You can explain how it's supposed to work." Ao blushed but recovered quickly, giving a confident explanation. The group didn't win first place, but they still received praise for creativity. After the event ended, the students relaxed in the courtyard, enjoying cold drinks and snacks. As the crowd thinned, Nia noticed Mr. Kofi sweeping near the main gate. He looked tired but content. She walked over to him. "You did the DNA test today," she said. "That was brave." He looked at her kindly. "Brave? No, not really. Curiosity is good for the mind. We should never stop learning." "You don't mind that they joke about you?" she asked quietly. Mr. Kofi shook his head. "People see only what's in front of them. Sometimes that is not the whole story." Nia nodded slowly, understanding more than she expected to. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever wish people treated you differently?" He smiled. "Respect is not something we ask for, child. It is something we give, even when others forget." His words stayed with her as she walked back. For the first time she felt a sense of guilt for all the time she had laughed at him. He never shouted, never complained, he only answered with kindness. That evening as the fair ended, Mr. Kofi stayed behind to help clean up. Most students had already gone home. The banners were half torn and bits of paper littered the floor. He quietly folded tables, stacked chairs, and swept the hall until it looked spotless again. When he finished, he stood alone for a moment, looking around the empty space. The moonlight filtered through the windows, casting soft silver light across the polished floor. He let out a slow breath and whispered something to himself in a language no one else at the school knew. It was a small prayer of gratitude, the kind he said every night. To him, cleaning wasn't just a job, it was a way to bring order and calm to a busy world. Outside, Ao and Tun passed by the window and saw him standing there. For some reason they went quiet. Watching him alone in the moonlight made them feel something they didn't expect. Respect, maybe even shame. "Do you ever think we go too far?" Tun asked quietly. Ao frowned. "He doesn't care." "Maybe he does," Tun replied. "He's just too kind to show it." Ao didn't answer. They both stood there for a moment, then walked away. Days later, as the science fair results were being processed, life at Silverwood returned to normal. The laughter in the halls, the lessons, the jokes, it all went on. But for a few students, something had changed. Nia found herself greeting Mr. Kofi each morning. Tun stopped making jokes when he saw him. Even Ao, though still proud, began to think before he spoke. No one yet knew how big the DNA test results would be, or how much it would change what they thought they knew about the quiet cleaner who swept their floors every morning. But soon, everyone at Silverwood Academy would learn that behind Mr. Kofi's humble smile was a story far greater than any of them could imagine. A week passed since the science fair, and life at Silverwood Academy slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The colorful posters had been taken down, the booths dismantled, and the excitement had faded. Yet, a quiet curiosity lingered in the air. The DNA test results from the university were expected to arrive soon, and many students whispered about what their ancestry might reveal. On Monday morning, the head of the science department, Mrs. Kamara, received an unexpected call from the university's research center. The voice on the other end sounded serious and slightly nervous. "Good morning," the woman said. "We have a rather unusual result from one of the samples collected at your school. Could we speak to a Mr. Kofi?" Mrs. Kamara was surprised. "Our cleaner?" she asked. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," the woman replied. "But there's something he needs to know. It's unusual." When she hung up, she sat in silence for a moment, unsure what to think. She decided to inform the principal, Mr. Adeyemi. He raised his eyebrows. "Unusual, you say? Well, let's call him in." That afternoon, after most of the students had gone home, a message went out over the school intercom. "Mr. Kofi, please come to the principal's office." In his usual calm manner, Mr. Kofi put away his mop, washed his hands and walked down the quiet hallway. He knocked softly on the office door. "You called for me, sir?" "Yes, please come in," Mr. Adeyemi said kindly. Mrs. Kamara and a representative from the university were there, sitting across the desk. The woman stood up and smiled politely. "Mr. Kofi, thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Layla from the University of Cape Falls. I'm here about the DNA test you took during the fair." He nodded, folding his hands politely. "Yes, I remember. Is there something wrong?" Dr. Layla hesitated. Not wrong exactly. But your sample came up as an exact match in our database, something very rare. It seems you are related to the late Dr. Emmanuel Adam, the founder of the Adam Research Foundation. For the first time, Mr. Kofi's calm face showed a flicker of surprise. He looked down for a moment, then back up. Dr. Emmanuel Adam was my father, he said softly. Mrs. Kamara's eyes widened. You're his son? Yes, he replied quietly. I left the foundation years ago. The room fell silent. Mr. Adeyemi leaned back in his chair. I had no idea. You've been here for almost 2 years. You never said anything. There was no reason to, he said simply. I came here to work, not to be noticed. Dr. Layla nodded gently. Mr. Kofi, Dr. Adam, the reason we called is that your family has been searching for you for a long time. After your disappearance, the foundation lost direction. Your father passed away, but his will left everything to his only son. He smiled faintly. I see. The world keeps turning even when we step away from it. By now, a few teachers had gathered outside the office, curious about the unusual visit. News traveled fast in schools, and by the next morning, everyone was whispering about it. Students gathered in small groups, trying to make sense of what they'd heard. Wait, you mean the cleaner is some kind of millionaire? Tund asked in disbelief. That's what people are saying, replied Nia. They said his real name is Dr. Kofi Adam. He's a scientist or something. Ao laughed nervously. That can't be true. He's just Mr. Kofi. He cleans floors. But deep down Ao didn't sound so sure. By lunchtime the whole school knew. The principal had tried to keep things quiet, but secrets rarely stayed hidden long. Some students were amazed, some were embarrassed, and others felt guilty for how they had treated him. That afternoon when Mr. Kofi walked through the courtyard, everyone stared. He carried his cleaning supplies as usual, calm and unbothered. The whispers followed him everywhere. There he is. Is it really true? Why would someone like him work here? He ignored them all as he always had. But this time, the silence that followed him wasn't filled with laughter. It was filled with awe and confusion. Later that day, the local newspaper showed up. They had somehow gotten the story and wanted an interview. Mr. Adeyemi met them at the gate and tried to turn them away, but they insisted. We just want a comment, the reporter said. The public has a right to know about the heir of the Adam Foundation. When Mr. Kofi found out, he sighed. Let them come tomorrow, he said quietly. I will speak once, then return to work. The next morning, the school gathered in the assembly hall. Even the youngest students were whispering excitedly. Mr. Kofi stood at the front, not in his uniform but in a simple shirt and clean trousers. He looked calm as ever, though the principal's voice trembled slightly as he introduced him. Students, Mr. Adeyemi said, we've all known Mr. Kofi as our cleaner. But today we've learned something that surprised us all. He is not just our cleaner. He is also a scientist and the son of one of Africa's most respected researchers, the late Dr. Emmanuel Adam. A wave of gasps spread through the hall. Ao looked at the floor. Tund stared blankly. Nia clasped her hands together, unsure what to do. Mr. Kofi stepped forward and spoke softly into the microphone. My friends, I did not come here to surprise anyone. I came because I wanted peace. I once worked in laboratories and conferences. I lived a life full of pressure and pride. But after losing someone dear to me, I needed silence. I needed to remember who I was without the titles. He paused, his gentle eyes scanning the crowd. Here among you I found that peace. I swept floors, cleaned classrooms, and watched you all learn and laugh. And that reminded me what matters most. It's not fame or wealth but kindness and respect. The hall was silent. Even the usual troublemakers were quiet. Some teachers wiped their eyes. Ao slowly raised his hand. Sir, he said softly, we're sorry. We didn't know. Mr. Kofi smiled kindly. You didn't need to know. What matters is what we learn from how we treat people we don't understand. From that day everything changed. The students greeted him respectfully. The teachers spoke about him with admiration. Even the janitorial staff, who had always been overlooked, walked with new confidence. That evening as he left the school, the sun was setting behind the tall trees. The air smelled of rain and the sky glowed orange and pink. He stopped by the gate and looked back at the building where he had quietly worked for so long. Ao, Nia, and Tund stood nearby, waiting awkwardly. Sir, Nia said gently, thank you for staying kind to us even when we didn't deserve it. He nodded. Forgiveness is a gift that heals both sides, he said. As he walked away down the quiet road, his shadow stretched long behind him. The whispers at the school slowly turned into stories, and the legend of the humble cleaner who turned out to be a scientist spread far and wide. By the end of the week, Silverwood Academy wasn't the same. Students spoke more gently, laughed more kindly, and thought twice before judging anyone by their job or clothes. And though Mr. Kofi's secret was out, he continued to come to school every morning, still sweeping, still smiling, still teaching in his quiet way. The news spread through the city like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the quiet cleaner from Silverwood Academy who turned out to be the long-lost scientist, Dr. Kofi Adam. Within days, newspapers printed his story, social media buzzed with photos of him standing humbly in his simple clothes, and people from across the country were asking the same question. Why would such a brilliant man choose to work as a cleaner? At Silverwood Academy, life seemed to slow down. Students whispered in the hallways, teachers spoke softly in the staff room, and the atmosphere felt different, more thoughtful. Everyone looked at Mr. Kofi with a new kind of respect. Some still couldn't believe it was true. Ao, Nia, and Tun sat under the old mango tree near the courtyard talking quietly. "Can you believe it?" Tun said, shaking his head. "He's one of the greatest scientists in Africa. And we made fun of him for cleaning floors." Ao sighed heavily. "I don't even know what to say to him. We treated him like he was nothing." Nia nodded, her eyes full of regret. "He was kind to us even when we were rude. Maybe that's what real greatness looks like." While the students wrestled with guilt, the teachers were busy preparing for an unexpected visit. The Adam Research Foundation had contacted the school. They wanted to officially recognize Dr. Kofi Adam and thank Silverwood Academy for taking care of him during his time away from the scientific world. The principal, Mr. Adeyemi, could hardly believe it. "We had no idea who he was," he said during a staff meeting. "We treated him as our cleaner. Now the whole country knows our school because of him." That evening, after the students went home, Mr. Kofi stayed behind as usual, sweeping the last few classrooms. Mrs. Kamara approached him quietly. "Dr. Adam," she said softly, "you don't have to keep cleaning. You're free to do whatever you wish. The foundation has sent people to meet you tomorrow." He looked up with a calm smile. "Thank you, but please call me Kofi. I prefer that. And as for the cleaning, it helps me think. It keeps me grounded." She hesitated. "But why hide? Why live like this?" He leaned on his broom, thoughtful. "After my wife and son died in a car accident, everything I built, my research, my fame, felt empty. I thought if I worked with my hands, if I did something simple, maybe I could remember what life really means." Mrs. Kamara nodded slowly, her eyes soft with understanding. "You've taught us more than any science could," she said quietly. He smiled but said nothing, returning to his work. The next morning, Silverwood Academy was filled with reporters, university officials, and foundation representatives. The assembly hall had been decorated with flowers and banners. The students gathered early, whispering excitedly as they waited. When Mr. Kofi entered, dressed neatly in a white shirt and black trousers, the hall went silent. The head of the Adam Research Foundation stepped forward to greet him. "Dr. Adam," he said proudly, "it is an honor to see you again. We searched for you for years. The world thought you were gone." Kofi smiled gently. "I wasn't gone. I was simply quiet. Sometimes the world speaks too loudly. I needed to listen to silence." The man laughed softly, not sure what to say. Then he handed him a thick envelope. "Your family's foundation has been waiting for your return. The research center, your father's legacy, it's all yours now." Kofi took the envelope but didn't open it. He looked around the hall at the students' faces. "These young people," he said, "have reminded me that learning never ends. I came here thinking I was escaping life. Instead, I found purpose again." Everyone in the hall listened closely. His voice was calm but carried weight. "We often believe that knowledge makes us greater than others," he continued, "but real wisdom comes from humility. A title or a degree means nothing if you cannot show kindness." There was a long silence before the hall erupted into applause. Some students stood, clapping hard, others wiped their eyes. Even Ao, Tund, and Nia couldn't stop the tears from falling. After the ceremony, the principal asked him, "Will you go back to the foundation now?" Kofi smiled. "Yes, but not to lead it the way I used to. I want to rebuild it with new ideas, scholarships for students, programs for schools like this one. Silverwood gave me peace. I want to give back." That afternoon, while reporters took photos, the students gathered around him. Ao stepped forward first, his voice trembling. "Sir, I'm sorry for everything we said and did. We were stupid." Kofi placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were young, he said softly. Mistakes are lessons. You've learned yours. Nia, standing beside Ao, looked down. You never treated us badly even when we didn't deserve respect. Why? Because anger doesn't teach, he said simply. Only patience does. Tund let out a shaky breath. You could have told us who you were. Kofi smiled. If I had, would you have treated me better? The three friends exchanged guilty glances. He was right. They wouldn't have laughed at a famous scientist. But that was the point. Later, when the event ended and most visitors had left, the students followed him to the school garden, where he often sat during breaks. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and gold. He sat on a wooden bench and looked at the children sitting around him. Do you know what science really means? He asked. Nia shook her head. Discovering things? He nodded. Yes, but also discovering yourself. Science teaches us that everything is connected. The stars, the earth, even the smallest leaf. The same is true for people. No one is too small, no job is too low. We are all part of the same world. The students listened quietly. His words were simple, but they felt deep. For the first time, they understood that greatness wasn't about being known, it was about being true. That night, as the school grew quiet, Mr. Kofi packed his small bag. He would be leaving soon to meet with the board of the foundation, but part of him didn't want to go. Silverwood had become more than a workplace, it was his refuge. Before locking the janitor's room for the last time, he looked around at the mops, the buckets, and the broomsticks lined neatly against the wall. You've kept me company, he whispered with a smile. The next day the whole school gathered at the gate to say goodbye. The students clapped, cheered, and waved as he walked toward the car waiting for him. We'll miss you, Mr. Kofi, they shouted. He turned back and smiled warmly. Don't forget, he said, clean hearts make a clean world. Ao, Nia, and Tun stood together watching him go. They didn't say anything at first. Then Nia whispered, he's still the same man even after all that. Ao nodded. Maybe that's what makes him special. When the car drove away, a peaceful silence settled over the school. The students went back to their classes, but something had changed inside them. They no longer saw cleaners, guards, or cafeteria workers the same way. Everyone had a story. Everyone deserved respect. In the weeks that followed, Silverwood Academy introduced a new scholarship program in Dr. Adams' name. It was open to any student who showed kindness and humility, not just good grades. And though he was far away, his influence stayed in every corner of the school. The students often told new pupils about him, the cleaner who turned out to be a scientist, the man who taught them the meaning of respect. They remembered his quiet smile. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Silverwood Academy's assembly hall. The air was still, heavy with anticipation. Every student sat quietly, their eyes fixed on the small wooden stage where Dr. Kofi Adams stood. His presence filled the room, not because he demanded attention, but because he carried calm authority. No one spoke, no one whispered. They all waited for him to begin. He looked at the students, some nervous, some embarrassed, and some still struggling to meet his eyes. A faint smile crossed his face. He had seen their change, their quiet efforts to become better since the truth had come out. He cleared his throat softly, his voice gentle and steady. Every person you meet, he began, carries a story you cannot see. Respect isn't about titles, it's about humanity. His words seemed to hang in the air like sunlight through dust. The students listened closely, the meaning sinking deep into their hearts. He paused for a moment, letting silence speak. You all looked at me, he continued, and saw a cleaner. But you didn't see the years behind me. The struggles. The choices. The reasons I stood in that uniform, holding a broom. Ao, sitting in the front row, lowered his head. He remembered how many times he had laughed at Mr. Kofi, how many times he had joined his friends in mocking the man who had only smiled back. Nia felt tears sting her eyes and Tun's hands clenched tightly in his lap. They wanted to say something, anything, but his calm, kind voice kept them still. When I worked here, Dr. Adam continued, I learned more about people than I ever did in a laboratory. You see, science can explain how the heart beats, but not what makes a heart kind. It can tell us how stars are born, but not why some people choose to shine quietly while others burn out trying to be seen. The teacher sat quietly, moved by his simplicity. His words carried no bitterness, no pride, only truth. He told them about how he had lost his family, how he had run away from a world that expected him to be perfect. I wanted to understand what real strength was, he said softly. I thought it came from knowledge, from being known. But I was wrong. Real strength is in forgiveness, in humility, in kindness. The students listened, mesmerized. Even the youngest ones understood his tone, his warmth. They didn't see a scientist anymore. They saw a teacher, a man who had lived through pain and still chose peace. He looked around the hall again. "Some of you might think I stayed silent because I was ashamed," he said, smiling faintly. "But silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is the best way to teach. When you mocked me, I saw your laughter as fear, fear of being small, fear of not belonging. But today I see courage in your eyes. You've learned." Ao couldn't stop himself. He stood up suddenly. "Sir," he said, his voice shaking, "we are sorry. Truly sorry. We were foolish and cruel. We didn't see you for who you were." Dr. Adam looked at him kindly. "I forgive you," he said simply. "But promise me this, never judge anyone by what you see. You never know whose shoes you're walking past." The students clapped softly, their hands hesitant at first, then stronger as emotion filled the room. The applause wasn't for his fame or intelligence, it was for his grace. Later that day the assembly ended but the lesson stayed. The students left quietly, their usual chatter replaced with reflection. They saw the cleaners sweeping the corridors and greeted them respectfully. Some even offered to help. The entire school seemed to breathe differently that day, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. In the following weeks, Dr. Adam chose to remain at Silverwood Academy. The foundation had offered him a grand office, a big salary and a chance to lead again, but he refused. He preferred the calm of the school, the laughter of children, the sound of chalk on blackboards, the smell of freshly cleaned floors. He told the principal, "Here I am not Dr. Adam. I am simply Kofi. That is enough." He started teaching small science lessons after school. Not official classes, just talks under the old mango tree. Students gathered around him in circles, listening to his stories about stars, plants, and DNA. But somehow the lessons were never just about science. They were about life. One afternoon he held up a leaf and said, "This leaf looks small and unimportant, but it gives air to the whole world. Never think your role is too small." The students nodded, understanding every simple word. Even teachers began to see their work differently. The gardener, the cooks, the guards, all became part of something bigger. There was no low job at Silverwood anymore. There was only shared respect. One morning, Kofi noticed Ao sweeping the assembly hall before classes began. He smiled quietly, walked up to him and asked, "You've taken my old duty?" Ao grinned. "It's not your duty, sir. It's everyone's." Kofi chuckled softly. "Then I suppose you've learned well." Years passed, but his presence remained a guiding light. Students graduated and left for universities across the country, always carrying his message with them. They often wrote letters to him. Some became scientists, some teachers, some artists, but every letter began the same way: "You taught us respect." One letter from Nia arrived one rainy afternoon. She had become a doctor. Her letter read, "I treat every patient as a story, not a case. You taught me that." He smiled as he read it, feeling a quiet pride that no award could match. As time went on, Silverwood Academy changed in many ways. The new library bore a sign, dedicated to Dr. Kofi Adam, who taught us that dignity needs no title. Every student who passed by touched the plaque as if it brought them luck. On peaceful evenings, Kofi often sat near the mango tree watching the sunset. Sometimes Ao, Nia, and Tund visited when they returned from university. They would sit with him, laughing and sharing stories. "Do you miss the old days?" Ao once asked. Kofi smiled. "Every day," he said softly, "because they taught me who I was." He never stopped being humble. When people called him doctor, he would gently correct them, "Just Kofi, please." He believed that true honor was not in names but in actions. One day, a young student approached him shyly with a notebook. "Sir, can you write something for me?" He took the notebook and thought for a moment. Then he wrote, "Be kind even when no one sees. That is real strength." The student smiled brightly. "Thank you, sir." Kofi nodded. "Now go and make your own story." As the years rolled on, stories of the cleaner who was a scientist became a legend told to every new class at Silverwood. But for Kofi it was never about legend. It was about living truthfully. He often said to the teachers, "We cannot change the whole world at once. But we can change one mind, one heart, one act of kindness at a time." And everyone who heard him believed it. When he finally retired, the entire school gathered once again in the same assembly hall where he had once shared his lesson. He looked out at the crowd, new faces, young faces, all full of hope, and smiled. "You are the future," he said. "Remember what I told you. Respect is not earned by power. It is given by choice." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Kofi didn't bask in it. He simply bowed his head, grateful. As he walked out of the hall one last time, the janitor handed him a broom as a farewell gift. He laughed gently and held it high. "It all started with this," he said. "And it taught me everything."